my name is Emerson Mosier. I'm going to be talking about the who, what, where, when, why, and what was happening globally. Who is Lewis Ruffin, who was an Army veteran, the sheriff, Lewis's father, a wealthy community leader named Joe Ruffin, and then one other police officer. What? A white mob broke out and formed a rampage, and they ended up burning down one church, and then multiple black communities, black cars, and ended up killing black people. They moved on to kill two of Ruffin's sons, one of them being only 13 years old. Rioters threw the bodies into flames of the church, then continued with their arsonist acts throughout the area. They burnt down black lodges, churches, and cars. They also killed several other people, but it was not documented how many. Joe Ruffin was the only one who was saved from this mob because he was rushed by a white commissioner. He was ended up arrested in a county jail in Augusta, and Ruffin there was only charged with murder of two white officers and was threatened with lynching for months. However, no one was charged with the mass riots, arson, destruction of the church, or other crimes committed during this mob. So everyone who was in the mob got off scot-free, whereas Lewis and Joe were both held accountable for their actions. Both Lewis and Joe fled for their life, but later died in exile. They were exiled from their communities and from their white communities, and ended up dying there. The church was rebuilt after the riots in 1919, but ironically was destroyed again by arson in 2014. This occurred in Milan, Georgia, and it happened on April 13th of 1919. Why this happened? So the context to the riots and the mobs was while they were on the way to the festival at Carswell Grove Baptist Church, Joe Ruffin saw his friend, Evan Scott, sitting in the back of a cop car. Joe offered to pay the bail, but was denied for his check, and instead was demanded for cash. So he had the money, but it was in cash and not in cash. It was in a check, not in cash. And they demanded cash, and he refused, and they ended up trying to Joe moved on and tried to collect his friend from the police car, and violence broke out. W. Clifford Brown, the deputy, enhanced this violence when he pistol whipped Joe, and the gun discharged. So Lewis acted on his instinct and trying to protect his father, grabbed the gun and shot Brown, killing him. And what was happening globally? On April 13th, 1919, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre occurred. The British troops fired on unarmed Indians in an open space. The similarities between the two is that the white mobs in both scenarios fire on seemingly innocent people with little to none buildup. The difference is that there was no mass burnings in Amritsar. The riot was simply just because they wanted to oppress the people. Whereas when there were riots in Georgia, there was a prompt, which was the shootings, but there was no need for the attacks. Thank you.
The racial violence that occurred in Milan, Georgia severely disrupted African American society by limiting social opportunities and reinforcing systematic inequality while simultaneously reigniting African Americans' determination to fight for justice and civil rights in the face of ongoing oppression.
Art is one of the main forms in which African Americans chose to speak out about the violence they endured during the Red Summer of 1919. The main forms of art they used usually included drawings and music. Though there is little to no art that has been inspired by this particular case in Milan, Georgia, there have been hundreds of other artworks that have been inspired from cases that have occurred throughout the country. Starting with the drawing category, many of his works have mainly been included in papers or newspapers and posters. An example of this is this drawing right here from the Afro-American paper, in which it is portraying mob law as a beast standing over the Capitol, signifying that this beast or mob law is actually above the actual law, putting itself above African Americans and whatever rights that they may have. But one great thing that came out of this dark time is a new genre of music that is called blues music. And though it has been around for quite some time now, a popular artist called Mamie Smith came out with a new record called Crazy Blues. Selling over 75,000 copies from the first month, Smith has ultimately changed the music world with just one song. Throughout the tune, it seems as though Smith is actually singing about her man, but by listening closer, you actually hear that Smith is singing about the abuse that African Americans have endured and have been dealing with across the country. Smith has since inspired hundreds of other artists and other singers to come forward and sing this blues music about their woes and everything else that they have endured. Though at first glance both of these artworks seem simple, both have very powerful impact and shows different ways in which African Americans chose to speak out about any violence they have endured.